Yeah, it's really straightforward. People need to be asking a very specific question. And the question is this. We spend about $11 billion a year on the FBI. And are the American people getting the $11 billion that they expect when they spend that money on the Bureau? And if the answer is no, then it needs to either be reimagined or destroyed. But some of our actions have actually borne some fruit. You know, we've got some people looking into, members of Congress are looking into the piece about Chris Wray using the jet the way he does, which has probably been wasting maybe upwards of $2 million of taxpayer money for his personal travel and for his personal preferences. And just so people understand what he did, he took an FBI jet, which is a $60 million aircraft funded by counterterrorism resources, and had it fly to Reagan National from Manassas. It's about a 15-minute trip tops. And he had it pick up and fly from the hangar where it lives to the federal airport that is closer to D.C., simply so he could avoid 45 minutes to an hour in traffic.
You are the consummate whistleblower, because I know that from reading the news, the documents. I mean, there's a lot of great men and women that have blown the whistle, but you've been one of the first, and you've had the most credible cases that are cut and dry. Like, we wouldn't know they were creeping around spying on parents at school boards without you. We wouldn't know that the FBI director was basically illegally using private jets for his own private interest, which is $50,000, $100,000 per trip. We wouldn't know. I mean, just it's a laundry list without you. So maybe you should start, now that you told us about yourself, with the laundry list of things, the torpedoes that you fired into the side of this corrupt, rotting Justice Department to I don't think to destroy it, but to fix it and somehow have it be reborn, or does it have to be abolished?
Yeah, it's really straightforward. People need to be asking a very specific question. And the question is this. We spend about $11 billion a year on the FBI. And are the American people getting the $11 billion that they expect when they spend that money on the Bureau? And if the answer is no, then it needs to either be reimagined or destroyed. Both of those things are possibilities. We shouldn't have any sacred cows in this country. The founding fathers came in and set up a country where we were not going to be relying on government. We're supposed to be relying on ourselves. So the Bureau answered a basic question in the 1930s. It goes back a little bit before that. But basically what they were trying to do is they were going after interstate crime before the internet, before phones were prevalent anywhere, before cell phones for sure, before competent radio signals going back and forth between different police departments, and before interstate communications were as easily available as they are today. And so the question that it was answering then was, what happens if a gangster robs a bank in Louisiana and then goes and does it in Texas, and then goes up and does it in Oklahoma? How do you deal with that person? Well, you have the FBI. That's what they did. They went interstate and they went after people that were doing interstate crimes. But today we have a very different world. We have a lot of sheriff's departments that can go 50 miles into a state that is beyond their borders. We have sheriffs that have inter cooperations. They've got mutual aid. So we shouldn't just assume that there needs to be this federal law enforcement agency the way that we see it. And that's the question that I always open. And I'm a skeptic. I'm an investigator, and skepticism is sort of the hallmark of that. And then, of course, your folks came and printed out all the articles I sent forward. It's actually kind of overwhelming to see it in person, because I don't actually go and pull these up. These are usually just links on a screen to me. But what do we start with? We started off talking about the parents that threats that were being threatened. We talked about Project Veritas being a member of the media. I've spoken publicly about that now. We went after a thing called the Militia Violent Extremists Symbols Guide, which was something that someone sent me over, knowing that the Bureau was going to be investigating basically veterans and cops. That's the people who have these. I mean, all my friends have either one of these symbols from this Symbols Guide, the Betsy Ross flag, the Punisher skull, the Second Amendment 2A, something like that. They all have this either on their T-shirts, they've got it hanging in their gyms, or it's tattooed upon their bodies. These are people that put everything on the line for this country. So you're going to tell me those people are potential extremists? They're going to go underneath the domestic terrorism symbols? That's a big problem. We've got a whole bunch of other things out there. We talked about how they were putting forward that misinformation and disinformation are potential federal crimes. There's a very, very narrow window where that's a possibility. So that's kind of scary. We found out that there was an LGBTQ gender ideology thing that they were pushing down on a bunch of Bureau employees. I actually remember it because they said that everyone had to take it. I was in the middle of having my third child. My wife was having our third child. We were, bringing him home. And I thought, man, I'm not going to go do that thing. It's stupid. It's a bad PowerPoint that's going to be pushing something that is antithetical to my religion. So No thanks to that. And the Bureau had such a negative reaction internally that they actually scrubbed it. But one of the brave whistleblowers that I work with, and there's a number of sources that I have within the Bureau that have been coming forward, all unclassified, all appropriate channels. We bring these things to Congress, and then a number of them make it to the light through different media outlets. And I'm glad they do, because this is America's information. Like, it doesn't belong to the FBI. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people that pay for it, which is the American taxpayers. And then we put out some other stuff here. I'm just going around the horn here, but we've got this piece that Tracy Beans did at Uncover DC called Terminating Dissent, where they merged, and this is very threatening, they merged the whistleblower protection training, which we get annually as federal employees, and the insider threat training, which people can imagine are kind of like spies and traitors. So that's like a Robert Hansen type or an Aldrich Ames. And they merged those together, and they kind of showed how if you're one, you might be the other as well. And so be cautious. And this was also coinciding with the Attorney General sending out a letter saying, don't go to Congress. You know, Jim Jordan's office came forward. The Republican from Ohio was very clear about saying you do have a right to go to Congress if you're a whistleblower. There's federal law that says you can. And then it just continues down. We found out that they were investigating Catholics in the Richmond field office, and that some intelligence analysts put out a intel product essentially saying that if you are a traditional Latin Mass Catholic, if you like to go to a pre-Vatican II style Catholic church, then you are potentially fertile grounds for white supremacy for exactly the reasons you mentioned: border policy, LGBTQ plus stuff, your abortion stances, which are really not Catholic positions. They're certainly not radical Catholic positions. They're kind of like generally Christian positions in this country. So I would imagine that's actually a majority of people in a lot of ways. I spoke about the pipe bomber early on, the fact that it was very clear to us. We had some leads. We were pulled off those leads to go after some nonsense about January 6th, investigations where people were calling into the 800 number in West Virginia, and they were basically just complaining about their neighbors and saying they didn't like them, they didn't like their politics, and that the FBI should investigate them. And unfortunately, the FBI actually obliged. There was something like 500,000 tips. I talked to Matt Taibbi, who's an independent journalist, and that was what he found out. There was about 500,000 or more tips in just a couple of weeks, which is insane. I think they said it was a 750% increase in tips coming in, and they were just mean-spirited. A lot of them had nothing to do with real allegations of federal crime. They were just saying, I don't like this person, I don't like their takes. They're just kind of a MAGA type, or maybe a MAGA type, or maybe they liked Reagan and they probably liked Trump. So that's pretty gross. But some of our actions have actually borne some fruit. You know, we've got some people looking into, members of Congress are looking into the piece about Chris Wray using the jet the way he does, which has probably been wasting maybe upwards of $2 million of taxpayer money for his personal travel and for his personal preferences. And just so people understand what he did, he took an FBI jet, which is a $60 million aircraft funded by counterterrorism resources, and had it fly to Reagan National from Manassas. It's about a 15-minute trip tops. And he had it pick up and fly from the hangar where it lives to the federal airport that is closer to D.C., simply so he could avoid 45 minutes to an hour in traffic going out on I-66. And it's not like the man is driving. You know, if anybody has any illusions about the fact that Chris Wray is not driving anywhere, he's got a 3-vehicle motorcade full of FBI agents that are armed, and they drive him, and he's got Wi-Fi and all the other capabilities, so he's always in touch. But he just didn't want to do that inconvenient trip, so they just, they fly the jet to him, they pick him up, and that costs us a minimum of $2,500 when it touches down on the runway. And then whatever that, the wear and tear on the jet is, and it's not a cheap aircraft, it's a Gulfstream 550. And then additionally,
well, the point is he's not supposed to do that legally. And I said I would interrupt, but don't you notice how that's why I print all the articles, is because when you're clicking online, you don't realize how much it is until you print them, and then you look at it all, and then it reminds you to actually cover all of them. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but what you're painting here is a picture of corruption, a picture of arrogance, a image of a system trying to criminalize dissent and demonize the most patriotic Americans and make us a political enemy. I mean, this is classic authoritarian totalitarianism. Please continue.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a police state. That's exactly what we're looking like. And the other thing is that we just found out, and people come to me and share information. I found out from 2 independent sources, which is kind of the minimum number of people you want to hear, that the FBI is currently investigating internally 700 plus FBI agents. There's about 14,000, a little bit less than 14,000 agents total. So about 5% of the workforce is being investigated now as possible extremists and threats to the FBI. And that's pretty disturbing. And what I also found out is that internally they are recruiting from the headquarters building. These are going to be the people that actually, are kind of good acolytes, and they believe that their loyalty to the Bureau is much higher than maybe their loyalty to the Constitution. But they're recruiting internally to the Hoover Building, getting more agents to go be part of this internal affairs unit, which is known as the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Insider Threat Units. So they are investigating their own at a rate that, we're obviously there's an opportunity cost. They're not going after terrorists that are legitimately in other countries, and they're not going after federal crimes like people stealing Americans' money. And there's just a whole host of these things where when you weaponize the government, you turn it against the people, and then you turn it against the people that are trying to keep it straight, which there are some good people in the FBI. There's no doubt about it. And they're now targeted too.
2 of our best-selling nootropics, or brain boosters, are now back in stock at InfoWarsStore.com. And for a limited time, they're 50% off when you get them together, or 40% off when you get them individually. Brain Force Plus and Brain Force Ultra. 2 separate formulas. They both give you good, clean energy without the crash. One is a 4 to 6 hour good base of clean energy, again with no hangover or letdown, and the other is a very special proprietary formula, that's Brain Force Ultra, that hits really, really quick, and I love it. It wears off in 2 to 3 hours. So if I've got to work at night but don't want to stay up all night, I can take it at, say, 9 o'clock at night, got to stay up till midnight working, doing a radio interview or something, and boom, or writing an article or writing a book, and then I get 2-3 hours of energy, and then you go right to bed after it. Brain Force Ultra, Brain Force Plus, both 50% off by themselves or 40% off individually. A lot of people love these products. They've got 5-star reviews, but if you haven't tried them, you really should. 50% off, InfoWarsStore.com.